Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have something rare, as you know, and that is a repeat guest. I don't often bring people back, but my good friend Hollywood Morris just constantly has so much great stuff to say. And as we come into the early part of the new year here, I just wanted to reintroduce him and have you hear all of the amazing things he is doing, not just to support the American law enforcement officer, but really just to support freedom in the media, to support freedom of worship, and just to talk about so much positivity in a time where we're hearing a lot of negative stuff. So Henry Hollywood Morris, welcome back to the show.
Betsy, my sister, thank you. I have missed you. I am blessed to be back on with you for a time such as this. Exactly.
Absolutely. And you're one of those YouTube channels and X accounts that I wake up and chuck. I've got a list of about 20 of them, and you're on it. So tell people what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Absolutely. So, it ties into what we see going on now, because this is the reason why I started Support Our Shields 5 years ago now. Can you believe it? It's been that, but it was the constant, not just defunding police, but demonizing them and dehumanizing them. And in that time, since you and I met a couple of years ago, I've traveled the country to honor fallen police officer. Now it's been over 80,000 miles in 33 different states and over 75 officers. And that is why, and you and I, we are in communication constantly, like real family, and seeing what we've seen the start of this year troubles me greatly. And that is why I've been speaking out even more with the focus, the attacks being on our ICE officers.
So what in the last 5 years have you been seeing that pendulum swing back? Because again, you started doing Support Our Shields like in the throes of the whole
Yes.
George Floyd movement. And frankly, as a black man, I'm surprised you left your house, because cops are out there just gunning y'all down, right?
Right. We're definitely, that'll tie us into the media narratives and lies a little bit later, Betsy. But yes, it's one of the things that troubles me so much about where we are as a nation right now, because in 2025, the end of 2024, we were just starting to see, I think, the communities who were suffering the most from the defund the police movement were starting to wake up and point the fingers exactly where the blame needed to go. They're leftist politicians that sold them a bunch of lies, like they've been doing, my entire lifetime, that, this defund the police movement for latte liberals didn't work out as well as people thought it was going to in Oakland, LA, Memphis, Chicago, noticeably places where that National Guard has been sent. So the sentiment, you were starting to see the sentiment change, and I think this is why this is strategic. What we've been seeing in Minneapolis and California is not by accident. They need the narrative defund 2.0, because this is what gives them power, money, and votes.
And I think that's what people really need to understand. We look at what's happening in Minnesota, especially the Twin Cities. We also look at the protests and the riots in Portland, LA.
Yes.
But yet you look at Memphis, you look at New Orleans, and both blue cities, but blue cities in red states.
Correct.
And what's happened in cities like those, right? Crime is down. The federal government came in there, and they didn't just they weren't just doing immigration enforcement, but they were really helping to clean up various neighborhoods. They were taking on street gangs, drug dealing. We're seeing fentanyl deaths down. I mean, we're seeing so much good, especially in those communities, like you said, that are so negatively impacted by the vilification of law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because again, starting in 2020 and really even going back to 2014,
Yes, correct.
we were told that communities of color and communities that were in poverty, if the police would just get out of their neighborhoods, that they'd be okay. That turned out not to be the truth, right?
Yes, it turned out to be an absolute nightmare, Betsy. And it was personal for me because while, like I tell every one of those departments that when I go there to honor officer, that it's because of the sacrifices that men and women like you are willing to make. I am the poster child for the American dream because I come out of that crack epidemic in the late 70s and early 80s, and I know what it's like to live in a neighborhood that's surrounded by crack houses and drug dealers, and that brings in prostitution and everything else that you can imagine to go along with it. So while yes, I had moved, out and don't experience that on the regular, well, this is commonplace for many people, in America, many American citizens who unfortunately they suffer the consequences of these bad policies. So what you literally saw, just like you said, in those cities that we were calling out, a lot of officers, and I understand it because you and I see it behind the scenes. We had record resignations, record early retirements, and then here was the other part. You actually had these George Soros funded woke DAs, the catch and release, the cashless bail. And because we are such a viral video society now, America got to see what actually happens when you continue to let these criminals out on the street, yet these leaders that hop in front of the camera 24/7 and blame President Trump for everything, they're the ones behind these failed policies, but it's those communities that suffer. And if you think, just back to a little over a year ago, that was why you saw the shift, especially among Black men and Hispanic men for President Trump. He literally beat Reagan, which I didn't think would be possible in my lifetime. But the messaging, when it's affecting you firsthand, Betsy, and you can't get the police response time because there are no police and they're 200 officers short, like in places like Chicago, then it becomes more than talking points because you're living with the consequences.
Fast forward now to Minneapolis. We're seeing
Yes.
this chaos that because ICE decided to come and really other federal law enforcement as well. They're doing a couple of things. First, they're investigating all the extraordinary fraud that we're finding out about with the Autism Center and the Leering Centers. And,
My sweatshirt is on the way, Betsy.
And so coupled with that is immigration enforcement is coming in. And again, what are they doing? They're arresting the worst of the worst. And I know you saw this. I saw this. It's so heartbreaking. That video that came out very recently of a young ICE agent who's, he's got a mask on, but he pulls up to some people that are trying to interfere with their operation. And he rolls down his window and he says, "We're trying to arrest a child sex offender. Do you understand?
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do. Don't you people want us to do that?" I mean, it was so heartbreaking because,
Correct.
I used to do that. I used to arrest, I used to arrest pedophiles. And I just can't imagine anyone in my community except the actual pedophile himself wanting me to make that arrest. And doesn't that break your heart?
Absolutely. And here's what else it does, Betsy. And I think that this is so timely that we're together today because just Sunday, remember what happened with the storming of the church in St. Paul. And I think that is bigger than what people understand because of the spiritual significance of it. These people are the perfect example of what we talk about when we explain they worship the creation instead of the creator and they're given over to a depraved mind. This is literally what wokeness leads to. These people are absolutely out of their mind and they're spiritually dead. And so, like you said, as believers, we have compassion for them, but that does not mean we don't confront their sin and outright wickedness. And that's what you're seeing on full display in Minneapolis. And that's why they felt emboldened to start. That won't be the last church because this is a part, if you understand how cultural Marxism works, and Saul Alinsky, who dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, to Satan, this tells you everything we need to know about the playbook that we're watching being ran in America. And like you said, for them, because they have made themselves God, yeah, then they can decide on a sliding scale basically what is evil and what is not. So everything has been turned on its head. And we're warned, in scripture, when people call good evil and evil good, that means judgment is not far behind.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because again, what
Yes.
we're talking about is a Baptist church in the Twin Cities. It was actually in St.
Yes.
Paul. Black Lives Matter and other Antifa types literally stormed a Christian church service because the pastor, and I think that pastor wasn't even there, but they believe the pastor was somehow
Correct.
involved with ICE, and he was, and they stormed this service. And there were some familiar faces
Bingo.
that were doing that. So I want to talk about, let's talk about that and your thoughts about Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and some of the, again, familiar faces and familiar
Yes.
rhetoric we're seeing and hearing from.
Yes, this is what I call, if this is BLM 2.0, Betsy, there in Antifa, they're sending out the JV squad, because remember, all of the perpetrators from 2020, they bought mansions and moved amongst all the white supremacists they said that were systemically racistly targeting them. So they moved
Only
in.
a few Black lives were enhanced,
Yes,
right? For just
correct.
them.
Right. So they couldn't get them. So they're going to the bottom of the barrel. And if you notice, they aren't getting the same response that they were getting 6 years ago. So this is why you're seeing the desperation. And it also brings me back to one of Saul Alinsky's, that, remember, Rules for Radicals is their Bible. And he says it's not about their action, it's about the reaction. They know the cameras are there. Remember, when we think back to the Renee Good situation, the way the media tries to frame it, that she had just dropped off her kid, but we know now that she had been there involving herself, interfering with a federal operation, this wasn't the first day, and this just she didn't stumble into the situation. So these groups are the same groups as we saw before. The closest thing that I can describe it to is they operate either like a cartel, which you have experience fighting against, or the American mafia. They are well coordinated. You see these 501c3s and they play the whack-a-mole shell. There's, you'll have 100 of them, how they send this money, because what we noticed Sunday is we see the same protesters that were there. We have footage of them at the Tesla, right, in Portland. Then we see them in LA. Do they work jobs, Betsy? How are we getting these people across the country to participate in the same, social upheaval in various cities? It's not by coincidence. And that is, I think, the one thing that's more important from the current DOJ. And we have to understand, for 4 years, they were allowed to grow while we were being told that any conservative Christians that happen, especially if you are white, then you're a domestic terrorist under the Biden administration. So while they were attacking grandmothers for praying out in front of Planned Parenthood centers, Antifa was allowed to grow, and BLM, they're desperate because they've wasted $90 million. So yeah, they're scraping up people that can't put together full sentences. But with that being said, Betsy, that does not make them less dangerous, because what they want, these birds of a feather, they attract crazies like they are. All we need is one to get a tragedy. And we know that it can happen at any time, especially, with what you saw when you were literally on the streets day in and day out.
Now, I got to ask you this, because,
Yes.
you go to a church, I go to a church.
Yes.
And when I first saw that come out, in fact, I texted my pastor and I said, can you imagine if this happened at our church? I'm sure there's been a lot of that going on, right? What would have happened at your church? I'm just curious.
Yes. So I'm so glad that you asked me this because I was actually on the road Sunday with Turning Point USA Faith down in South Florida. And so my wife was watching, our church online, and she said, could you imagine had they come into our church in Eustis, Florida, and I'm good at imitations. And I said, so our pastor, who is a Marine, I said, it's Steve Austin moment. He would have just stood from behind the pulpit and said, oh, hell yeah. Listen, it's totally, basically, they know, I mean, again, they're evil, they're not idiots. They know the softer targets that they can attack because they never like for those tables to be turned on them. And I can tell you, and I think your situation is very similar because you're one of them. When you go to church with law enforcement, retired special forces, and Marines, it's a whole different type of environment in that sanctuary. Am I right?
Oh, yes. And we all talked about that, and it just and I think you're right. I think they recognized that they could go into this church, and again, it's a
Yes.
very everybody talks about Minnesota. Oh, it's a big hunting state and all that. It's really, especially there in the Twin Cities area, it's very anti-Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
And I think people have been sort of coerced, even Christians, into just
Correct.
being I don't want to say weak, but being more
I'll say it weak.
yeah, right. I know, more complacent, I guess, is a kinder
Yes.
word. And
Yes.
and we really can't do that. Let
No.
let me ask you this now. Now of course several of these folks have been arrested. We're gonna see all the hoo-ha from that. Do you think they're gonna go into a mosque and do that?
Absolutely not. And that is the other thing. that is the other thing. And you will never see them do that because they know within the first minute hands will be laid on them and it won't be to pray. I guarantee you that. And so exactly, that is the difference. And it's absolutely, I'm in the free state of Florida. This is the heart of MAGA country. And you see the difference here where the protesters are on the side of the road. And I mean, they're literally, they're on the paved sidewalk because it has already been established here with sheriffs like Grady Judd and all the way up to the top with the Governor DeSantis himself, that this is the FAFO state. And the citizens also, we carry that same attitude. So it's like you said, I'm here in Central Florida, it's very similar. Orlando, you've had some smaller protests. There have been that have been operations done in Orlando, and nothing like you see there because remember, what annoyed me so much about the Brooksville Park police chief 2 days ago, Betsy, in that press conference, with the virtue signaling all stars, I called them, was he neglects to point out that because they are sanctuary cities and basically Minnesota is a sanctuary state, he knows that they're not helping ICE. And Mayor Frey literally finally admitted it on Chris Cuomo last night. So they're setting up the situation to be as chaotic as it is. Then they complain and virtue signal when the chaos happens. This is the leftist playbook that has been adopted by the full DNC. We can't say basically that these are some radicals in their party anymore. This is their party. They took off the mask in 2020. This is who they are.
Absolutely. And that whole press conference in Brooklyn Park, which by the way is where poor Kim Potter was,
Yes.
she had to go to prison. She was prosecuted by Mr. Ellison there, and
Yes.
And she ended up going to prison because of a horrible mistake that she made under duress,
Yes.
where she pulled out her pistol instead of her taser, trying
Yes.
to arrest a guy with a huge rap sheet and all that. And what really struck me about that press conference is two things. One is that they're accusing ICE of all these dastardly things with zero proof.
Right.
Zero proof. Oh yeah, we tried to
Notice.
record it, but they slapped the phone out of our officer's hand.
That was so convenient, right? with everything being captured on video, none of these incidents that they claim that ICE is doing, we have no video evidence.
Right, right. And the other thing is, I hate the pitting of law enforcement against law enforcement.
Yes,
And this is part of the thing that makes it so dangerous. And
correct.
you know, we just saw, for example, in New York City a few nights ago, where we had several NYPD detectives go to a hospital in need of emergency care because they got hurt on an operation, and the hospital staff treated them like crap until they found
Yes,
out they were NYPD. They thought they were ICE agents. I mean, this is getting
correct.
dangerous where you're pitting law enforcement against law enforcement, medical against law enforcement. And now,
Yes,
and we had this happen here where I live in Southern Arizona the other day. Our state police were, they chased a guy into one of our little towns here who had a stolen car and all this stuff. Our little town cops went to help their brothers and sisters from the state police, and the whole community was up in arms because they thought our state police were helping ICE. And it's getting insane, and it's getting dangerous,
yes.
and it's going to continue to get people hurt, don't you think?
Oh, I absolutely think that it is. And this is I think that is what bothers me the most about it, Betsy, is because let's back up to, basically 2 weeks ago today when the whole Renee Good tragedy takes place, one of her own making. And that's the part that you can't escape because we have adults in America who have never faced consequences. So they're literally, they act like children, but you have adult responsibilities. I think she's the poster child for that. The second part of it is because of the way that these things are being framed in the media. Again, you and I know, and your audience have family members and them who themselves who know what it's like to have elected leaders and the national media demonize you and turn the public against you. Well, you guys didn't have a rock to hide under. You still had to go out in that environment every day. And so the results that we get from this is what none of these mainstream networks, who, by the way, the coverage of Minneapolis, the ICE operation there, the report came out this morning, 93% negative coverage of ICE. You know when it wasn't that, Betsy? Under Barack Obama's 8-year term when he deported over 3 million illegal aliens and no one said a word. This is how the media, and that's a video that I'm dropping this weekend where CNN went out with ICE during his administration. Guess who was the director of ICE? Tom Homan.
You mean the guy who got the award from Barack Obama?
Exactly,
That guy?
correct. Correct. Yes, that guy. I'm like, amazing how they play this game. And the problem is, though, the officers, you guys are the ones that are living with the real life consequences. These producers and these punk politicians, as I call them, they don't live with the consequences. They have private security and they live in gated communities. So when you think about her aiming that vehicle at him and you have, complete idiots like Stephen A. Smith who, you're terrible in sports, sir. Why would you try to break down a law enforcement operation? But he says he could have shot the tire of a 3-ton vehicle that already hit him. Like, basically, I was like, you met my wife, and she's like, okay, I'm a veterinarian. I know nothing about military or law enforcement. Even I know that only happens in the Matrix. That is something that Keanu Reeves does with John Wick. That's not reality. But what is reality is since 2020, when the first wave of defund the police took place, we have had 55 officers in America killed by vehicular homicide or vehicular assault. None of them got the response or the coverage by the media that Renee Good received. And yet, if you think about that, Betsy, for the audience, we're in the playoffs. We have NFL fever, national championship just finished. 55 there's only 53 players on an NFL roster. That you just removed the entire NFL football team with the officers that we have lost with people using their vehicles to murder them. Let that sink in.
I'm so glad you brought that up because people don't realize how often the suspects weaponize vehicles, not just against ICE, but against law enforcement. I've been hit by a car. I got a fake knee because of it, and you know, it hurts and it's not fun. And it's something that kills us. It injures more. You know, every year we're up to about 87,000 assaults on law enforcement officers in this nation.
Correct.
And a lot of them are vehicular.
Correct. And I think that, Betsy, is directly tied into the rhetoric and the lies and the false narratives. Because now, think about it, you have the same party who conveniently tried to lie 2 years ago when when the results of their bad policies. Remember, all of this, let's reimagine in policing. I'm from the hood in Fort Lauderdale. I ain't reimagining nothing. This ain't South Beach, okay? So it's like, yeah, I'm not reimagining police. But when all of that, remember, when those bad decisions became reality, they did two things. What you saw happening in DC with cooking the books and changing felonies to misdemeanors to lie that crime is down, or we just don't report it at all, or they keep moving the needle. They go back to, well, ICE is the new, remember you've heard this one recently. ICE is the new slave patrol. See, you gotta do the emotional game and play the black versus white race card because they can't stand on their failed policies. So just the same people who were screaming for defund the police and then said they didn't do it after the failures of those policies are the same people now this is an election year, who are running saying defund ICE. That's why I said, where have we seen this movie before? This is the same playbook. They only have one playbook.
And you know what I think, and this is the last thing I got time to talk about, what I think has changed since 2020 is people like you, is the independent media. Talk about being a member of that independent media, because when you talk, I love those statistics about the negative coverage of ICE. But are people really paying attention to the legacy media? I think independent media has taken their place, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think that is so important if we are going to save our country, which is the greatest nation God has ever allowed to exist. Notice who you see at these protests interfering, and it tells you all you need to know. And that's why I said, you see these are older white suburban women, for the most part, jumping out in front of vehicles, meemaws, trying to fight ICE agents.
I apologize for my age and gender. My hair is not blue.
Yes. This is why I said this is a credit to what we've been doing and the power of independent media. It's also why it's so important. But here is the warning of it also, though, Betsy. It is also why they are trying to find another perfect victim. And so I don't know if you heard about the case in California where it was off-duty ICE agent, New Year's Eve, the guy, you're shooting the AR-15 in the middle of a community. Again, it's stupid games and stupid prizes, but they've got Ben Crump, America's #1, ambulance chaser. You see, they're trying to run the same playbook to see if they can get the community to bite on. So don't be surprised in Minneapolis or definitely California next. That's why you notice that press conference saying that, well, these people were racially profiled and stopped, yet we have no footage of it. That's the angle they want. They're not getting the same response from, the senior liberal white women screeching in the street. So yes, they need the race narrative to run with that. And that's what they're going to hammer that hard. They're going to flood the zone here in the next couple of months. Basically, that's my prediction with that. And so that makes what we do important, because 6 years ago, we were playing defense the whole time. We cannot wait. We need to attack every lie and every false narrative like the word commands us to do.
You are so right. Tell people where they can find you, follow you, hire you, give us all of it.
Yes. First of all, the website is supportourshields.com, and then social media, Facebook, X, YouTube at Support Our Shields. You know as well as I do, the support is very important because this is what my retirement, the retirement fund has been used for this strictly out of my pocket. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning, Betsy, I will fly, if it's not delayed because of this winter storm, but it's to Westboro, Pennsylvania, to honor Andrew Diorte, who was 30 years old, who was killed last year with that hostage standoff in Pennsylvania Medical Center. So this is why this is so important. You know, this is a passion for me that caused me to put everything else on the back burner with production, what I was doing, because I believe that if we lose the men and women who are willing to risk their lives for total strangers, we can become Venezuela. We may think it can't happen to America. Or you're literally one generation away from living under communist dictatorship. That's what Ronald Reagan warned, and he was right.
Oh, yeah, it's so well said. I got to tell you, I can't thank you enough for what you do. I can't thank your wife enough for letting you do it, because she's amazing as well. And we really appreciate you catching us up, and we're going to pay attention to your predictions and continue to follow what you do. So we so appreciate it. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.